Hello and welcome to episode number 223. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. This is once again one of our premium episodes, recorded especially for all you, our premium subscribers, so thank you very much for your support. And don't forget that if you are a PMP, you can earn 30 PDUs in total over 3 years, just for listening to the interview today and all our other episodes. To learn more about this, please go to pm-podcast.com/PDU. Today's interview with Elizabeth Herron about her new book, Customer-Centric Project Management, is intended, sort of, as an implementation guide to moving your own projects to a customer-centric way of working, using a model called Exceed. We also want to give you some guidance for ensuring that customer centricity is sustainable and supported in your organization. To achieve this, we will be looking at the case study section from her book, which comes from her own experience and day-to-day work. While there is, of course, no guarantee that customer centricity will always lead to project success, adopting a customer-centric mindset and using the Exceed process to measure and monitor customer satisfaction will, on the other hand, help you move towards working with happier and more engaged customer. And now, well, please get inspired and enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcast's feature interview. Today with Elizabeth Herron, author, blogger, and speaker.
Hello, Elizabeth, and once again, welcome back to the Project Management Podcast.
Hello, Cornelius. Thank you for having me on the podcast again.
Sure. So I promised our listeners during the first interview that we'd be having a second interview, a bit more depth, going into a case study of what you have done. I believe that's also the case study that you use in your book, Customer-Centric Project Management, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I thought it would be good to give you an example of how it actually works in real life.
Right. But why did you discuss this project in your book?
Well, my co-author and I, we wanted to prove that the ideas behind customer centricity in a project management environment, it wasn't just a theory. It was something that we knew actually worked, and we were doing it anyway. We did it. We were working that way long before we decided to put the ideas into a book, and we knew it was making a difference. So we thought, as well as all the good theory about post-implementation reviews and all that stuff, it was worth offering some proof to people who were reading it that actually we tried it and that we got some good results.
Tell me a little bit more about the company, the project, the customers.
Well, we work, Phil and I, for a company called Spire Healthcare in the UK, and it's a private healthcare business. So we deliver private healthcare through a network of 38 hospitals across the UK, from Edinburgh in the north to Southampton in the south. And each hospital is driven by a hospital director who has an individual target for running their business. So the performance of each hospital is important. And then we have the central functions like IT function where I sit, and I work in our London head office. And we've been around not very long in our current iteration as Spire Healthcare, because we were previously part of another company. But in terms of how we've tried to set up our IT division, we wanted to make sure that because we're very geographically split across the country, we wanted to make sure that whatever we did from the central office was suitable for everybody across the country, and that we were getting feedback from people across all the different hospitals and the other business units as well. So the project that we use as the example in the book is about upgrading all of the technology in our radiology departments. So that was hardware and software, a big program to update all of that, and it took 4 years. And what we were trying to do during that time was to install the new software and hardware at the hospitals, then do a central software upgrade as well, and replace some of the kit in medical technology too. And I really love healthcare because medical technology changes all the time, and to be able to keep up with medicine, you've got to be able to adapt and change and be flexible. And so we're constantly doing programs of updating hardware and software, and this was quite a big initiative to replace kits all over the country. But it was good. It got us out and about and travelling. But our core program team was split across 5 locations, and it was also travelling extensively to the different hospitals and offices. And what we thought we'd do with taking a more customer-centric approach to how we were managing the project was that would allow us to standardise our approach across a distributed team and make sure that we were constantly feeding back to each other how things were going, so that we could share best practices from each individual, from the work that we were doing in each individual hospital, and making sure that we took it forward to the next hospital.
And what specifically did you do in order to make it more customer-centric?
Well, what we were doing, the actual project itself, was to upgrade put in a new radiology information system and a new picture archiving and communication system, so RIS and PAC. So if you've got listeners from a healthcare background, I'm sure they'll have come across those products before. It's commonly available, and what technology now, and what we were doing was making sure that we were asking the customer of the project in each hospital how it went for them, asking them regularly, so at the beginning, in the middle, at the end, just to make sure that whatever they expected us to be doing while we were working in their hospital, we were on track. And obviously, IT is essential to running a hospital, but patient care is more essential.
Yes.
And we couldn't do anything that would interrupt or be detrimental to patient care. And we were working with a lot of clinical staff as well. And clinical staff, we'd be in a meeting and someone's pager would go off because there'd be an emergency or a query, and they'd just walk out. And obviously, as a project team, we had to make sure that we could cope with that and adapt, because you can't expect people always to be able to attend meetings when it's convenient for you. You've got to fit around the needs of an operational hospital to be able to do things. So we knew that we had to be customer centric because of the way the business worked, but the way that we did it in practice was to make sure that we asked people regularly, how are we doing? What should we be doing differently? What are your top challenges? How can we address them? And then fix them. Make sure we went back and let people know what the feedback was, and pass all that learning on to the next hospital and then the next hospital. So we got better and better and better as we went along.
Right. So my understanding is, even though you said it was a 4-year project, it wasn't 4 years in all hospitals, right?
Oh, no.
Each hospital took maybe, 6 months, 9 months, something like that, maximum.
A bit
right?
less than that. Some
Some
hospitals took longer than others, but then you've got different sizes and different requirements at every site. So yes, you're right. We were working on it for 4 years, but each hospital didn't have us there for 4 years.
Had a shorter project. So when you said we asked them at the beginning and the middle and at the end, you didn't ask them on day 0, then 2 years later you asked again somebody, and then 2 years later at the end you ask again. It's at the hospital throughout the implementation you ask people how you were doing, and you did those continuous reviews. What kind of results did you get?
Well, they were quite interesting discussions, actually, and they did flag up some things that we were able to quickly do something about. To give you an example, there was an issue with the service we were getting from the vendor, the people who were supplying the software, that we hadn't previously identified. And we were able to pass that on to the vendor, and they were able to fix it. People at the beginning were concerned there wasn't enough training, so we looked at ways to address that. So the fact that they had the opportunity to flag up issues outside of our regular project team meetings meant that we engaged in more dialogue with them, and also worked both ways, because it meant the project managers working on the programme had a better understanding of the issues that were being faced by the hospital staff, and they could build that learning into their future plans. And there was something else as well that we can only prove it anecdotally, but
that's always good. Yes.
But what we found, we think, is that having project managers on site with their customers and being really interested in the customer's environment and the challenges and how they sort of run the departments, it led to a bit more understanding both ways and support from the customers when times were difficult. Because all large programs, especially when you're trying to do something that's putting in brand new technology, they all have ups and downs, and we had ups and downs as well. And this project was no different. But the further we got through it, the more it felt that customers were more forgiving, because they understood that we were listening, we were trying to fix their problems, we were going back to them when we had fixed problems, And if we hit a new problem, they had faith that we would be able to do something about it. We also had some interesting results because we were asking them for a score out of 10. And obviously, it was part of a conversation. So we got some quite good constructive criticism and verbatim comments as well. 90% of the verbatim comments we got were constructive criticism. So feedback about what we could be doing better. But when we asked people to give us a score out of 10, the numbers were consistently higher than the comments would lead us to expect. And we saw this over and over again, that people were quite happy to explain everything that we were doing wrong and then still give us 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 for the service that we were providing. So I think that for me showed again that we were being successful in engaging people in what we were doing, because some of the numerical scores were probably based on the fact that we were trying hard to understand them and trying hard to make sure that we knew what they were doing. And it's also, we looked at the verbatim comments that we got, and there was a big shift in the way that people were responding to us. So back in April 2010, for example, we got comments like, we needed more support, we didn't understand the impact of the project. And then in October 2011, we got comments like, the project manager has worked incredibly hard throughout the whole project, and her involvement has been very much appreciated by myself and my team. And I thought, when you read stuff like that, you've got to think, we've changed how our project team worked with people to make sure that we really address some of the issues that were raised in the early days.
Yeah. And the numerical questions that you asked them to give you a score from 1 to 10. In the previous interview, you mentioned 4 criteria: issues, communication, planning, and delivery. Were those the 4, or was there any other way in which you measured performance?
We did change those questions slightly for this particular project. I think for every project that we've done where we've used this approach, we've tailored the questions to suit. And for this particular set of work, we looked at how well we're managing your issues, how well we're communicating with you, how well the project deliverables are being integrated into the existing hospital processes, and how is it going overall? What's your general feeling?
Okay.
The integration one was quite important because we also had to do, it wasn't just here's some new hardware, here's some new software. It was also around training, process mapping, re-engineering, supporting the clinical team, the admin team through the big shift to working practices to adopt a new type of technology. So we did have slightly different questions for this one, but they seemed they better reflected what we wanted to know.
Sometimes when I did interviews with customers, I felt a certain hesitation on their part to open up and really tell me what they were thinking. So was it easy or hard for you to get people to talk?
Well, I thought it would be quite difficult, partly because they're all busy people with difficult day jobs, and finding time with them would be difficult. But actually, people were quite happy to talk. I think because we were prepared to listen to them, they were prepared to tell us what we could be doing better or how they thought things were going. And I think people really valued the opportunity to put their points across. The thing I think people find frustrating is when you listen to all their concerns and you nod and you go, yes, that's really important. And then you go away and you do absolutely nothing. Because next time you ask them for feedback, there's no incentive for them to give you anything because they have no confidence that you'll do anything with it. So the key bit for us was, yes, listening and getting scores out of 10 and answering our questions was important. But what's more important is actually you act on that feedback and you take it away and you do something. Or if you can't do something, and there's certain things people, customers come up with the weirdest and wackiest things. Oh, you must do this, that and the other. And if you did this, I'd give you 10 out of 10. Things that are completely unrealistic that you can never deliver in a million years. You've at least got to go back to them and say why that's not a realistic expectation for them to have. And it's that sort of two-way feedback that's the important thing. And that's how I think we managed to convince people it was worth spending time talking to us.
How did you record the information, the feedback that you received from them?
We did it on a spreadsheet. We had our 10-point scale, which went from 1, which was consistently very poor, through to 10, which was excellent. And we had just a spreadsheet which had our questions on. And as well as a space to capture all the comments, we also had a score out of 10 for each of those 4 questions. They're all naturally subjective measures. So when you ask somebody how well's the project going overall, and they say, oh, it's 6 out of 10, that's good, or 7 out of 10, that's consistently good, that's useful because it gives you a moment in time. But the subjective opinion, the verbatim comments, was actually really what we wanted to understand. So that was the practical way of how we gathered the information. We built it into the project management process, and we had those customer satisfaction reviews carried out in routine project meetings. So we didn't have to schedule special meetings for them. And the other thing we did that was quite, that I think made it sticky as an approach, and how we managed to keep it going for so long, was that we built it into the objectives of the project team members. So they were assessed in a performance review. So at the end of every year, you have a performance review of how did you do against your targets for this year.
Right.
And at the end of their target in year 1 was to get a score of 6 or more, which was good. I mean, 5 was acceptable. So we said we wanted everybody to be getting scores of good or better in year 1. Mm-hmm. And then obviously we thought we could build on that and increase the targets in future years. So that was an incentive for the project managers to have these discussions with people and project team members to start recording the data. Otherwise, we thought we're just paying lip service to it, really. It's fine to have, great ideals about engagement and satisfying our customers, but unless you actually, I hesitate to use the word force, but incentivize people, incentivize our team members to go out and actually gather this information. And we also changed our monthly reporting template. So as a department, as a team, we had to report once a month to the sponsor and to my IT director. And I put a little line in there that said, the customer satisfaction score for the month is ... So every month I knew, as my own incentive, that I had to make sure that people were doing their reviews so that I had something to report upwards. So we tried to make it really transparent and visible and in your face all the time, so that it became just a part of the way that we do business.
You said that you worked with many hospitals over those 4 years. First you do hospital A, then B, then C, then D. Was there any bleed through, any discussions, any communication between the customers, sort of by the time you reached the 5th hospital, they're standing there at the door going, oh, we've heard of you. You're doing a great job. Come on in. Let's do this project together.
Yes, they talk to each other all the time because the clinical sort of job families get together regularly,
right,
and share what they've done across all of the hospitals. So yes, they were very vocal in discussing things with each other. I'm not sure that we were ever welcomed with open arms. I think that they did hear things, and I think by the end, people were much more keen to work with us than they were at the beginning, because obviously it's the teething problems that you have when you try to do anything new. The first few hospitals were very difficult. We weren't really sure what we were doing. We were doing something we'd never had to do before. We were working in an environment where we had lots of people all over the place trying to all come together. And so, we obviously got better. We got better at working with hospital teams. We got the technology working better. So by the time we ended up going into our last few hospitals, I think nobody likes change, do they? So I wouldn't say there were a couple of hospitals where they were desperate to upgrade their technology, and they were really keen to work with us and to do things as quickly as they can. So we certainly did experience that. But I would say for other people, they would see it as a low-level IT thing that just has to happen in the background. But both ways you can work with it. You can either keep out of their way and get the technology in, get the training done in a most discreet, easy, quick way possible, which is as little disruption to the hospital as you can. Or you can do it in a way where they are coming to all your meetings and making sure that they ring you once a week and find out what the latest is. So you have to tailor your approach to depending on the staff that you're working with and the people that you're delivering the project for. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yes. You've already given us tons of tips. For instance, feedback is important. If somebody tells you A, go back and tell them that you have implemented A, or why you're not going to implement A, or make it incentivized for the project manager to actually use this approach. Any other tips that you still have for us? in this regard?
Well, I thought you'd ask me this question, so I have a list of 7.
Yeah, it's usually one of my final questions, tips and tricks, and how do we do this on our own projects? Yes.
So I have 7 handy hints.
Oh, wow.
They're quite short, so don't worry. I would say keep your satisfaction scoring as simple as possible. So for us, 1 to 10 was easy. You might want to do 1 to 5. Whatever it is, make it really, really basic. Mm-hmm. And secondly, have a simple process to record it and measure it and monitor it. We used a spreadsheet, and then I did a little graph of each month, whether the scores went up or down and in which area they were up and down. So I could say whether communication was getting better or worse, for example. 3, you've already covered, deliver on your promises. If you'd say you're going to do something, just do it. We also involved our outsourcing partners and our suppliers. So my 4th tip is to make sure that if you're working, projects don't happen in a vacuum. If you're working with somebody else, a supplier or another vendor, talk to them about what you're doing, because chances are you'll end up having to pass some queries on to them. People want specific outputs. So focusing on specifics is the way to deliver the most value to the customers. So that's my 5th tip. And you've covered this one as well. If you want people to take it seriously, build it into the way you assess performance and put it in their performance review as an objective. And finally, I would say satisfied customers make useful allies in difficult times. So it's worth trying to work with them as far as you can to make sure that if you do hit problems, they are there to back you up and they understand the challenges that you're facing as well.
Yes, I've always found that very important. If you bend over backwards to satisfy your customer, then the customer will bend over backwards to make life easier for you in times of trouble.
Very much so.
Yeah, extremely. Well, these were all the do's. Got any don'ts for us?
Yes. One of the challenges of doing this on projects is that projects don't always last long enough to gather meaningful data. Because at the beginning of the project, nothing's much happened for the customer to comment about. And by the time it's over, you've got the post-implementation review as an opportunity to talk to the customer about what went wrong. So one of the big challenges is finding the length of project where this is actually a useful approach. So I would say, don't try to do this on projects that are really short, because you won't get any meaningful data, or it won't last long enough for you to be able to track anything. So that's one thing to consider. We did a mix of interviews over the phone with people and interviews over email and face-to-face. And I would say the most successful way is always face-to-face. You can do the others, but if you have at all the opportunity, go face-to-face, then over the phone, and only use email as a last resort, because you don't get the richness of the conversation if you just email people some questions and say, send me your scores out of 10. And I'd say finally, don't ignore things that don't seem relevant to you, because when we were talking to customers, we often uncovered issues that were nothing to do with the project. And it would be very easy to say, oh, well, that's not my project, I don't care. But we always made sure that we passed the information on to the right team. So something like, oh, well, this would be better, but we couldn't get onto email that day. So that was a real negative point. Or there's been system downtime, or the servers are broken, or stuff that wasn't anything that we had any control over. But, it's human nature to, when you're faced with the opportunity to give feedback, you give feedback about whatever. And it's not their fault. They don't necessarily know what the boundaries of the project are. And IT's IT to them. So we always made sure that we fed back things. So don't ignore anything that is raised. And if you can, go back and let them know, or at least let them know that somebody else is dealing with it, even if it's not something you can fix. Then that's a really important thing.
All right, let's take a look into the future. What will be next?
Well, we're using the same approach on our big project to replace our back-end financial services system. And over the last 9 months, we've seen our customer satisfaction scores rise from 6 to 7.2, which doesn't seem very much. But that's 5 different stakeholder groups averaged out. And they've all had their little journeys of some months we're better at dealing with them than other months. So I think what's next for me is to make sure that we're properly acting on all that feedback, because across the board, I absolutely know we can do better than 7 out of 10. And we also want to start using the same scoring method with third-party suppliers. We're doing it already with 2 of the vendors that we use. We sit down with them monthly and say, how are we working with you? What you could do differently, what we could do differently. And that gives us real tangible ways to assess how they're performing as suppliers. I think we could probably do that with a greater number of third parties, and make sure that we're getting everybody really behind the ideas of making sure that we are focusing on what are the key challenges. When you ask people what their issues are and they tell you, then next month when you go back and talk to them, do they have the same problems or have you managed to do something about it?
Lovely. All those of you out there who now think, I want this too, this sounds absolutely great. Well, do get the book. The case study is explained in the book. And even more important, Elizabeth has 4 appendices in there. Appendix 1, the issues list from Spire Healthcare's initial implementation. Then Appendix 2, a generic Project Exceed survey template, so that would allow you to do the surveys and ask people. And then Appendix 3, tailored Project Exceed survey template, so more tailored to the project of the case study, I suppose. And then we also have a sample job description text in there. So very helpful for your own projects if you want to give this a try. The book is called Customer-Centric Project Management. It is written by Elizabeth Harrin and Phil Peplow. It is published by Gower Publishing and 115 pages strong. Elizabeth, once again, thank you for being on the program.
Thank you.
And that was our discussion with Elizabeth Harrin on the how of implementing customer centricity on your projects. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. And if you are a project manager who wants to become either PMP or PMI ACP certified, then the easiest way to do so is, of course, with our 2 sister podcasts, the Project Management Prepcast and the Agile Prepcast. And study for the exam by watching the in-depth exam prep video training from pmprepcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. The more ridiculous the deadline, the more money will be wasted trying to meet it. Until next time.